Today, we are doing the fourth and last episode on our series on the DNC and RNC. For today, I'm going to try and give my final thoughts on either convention as a whole, and I'm going to try and voice my qualms with each convention singularly. Let's start with the DNC. The first and biggest issue I had with the Democratic National Convention and the Democratic Party as a whole was the selection of Kamala Harris as vice president to run alongside Joe Biden. This is for three main reasons. The first reason is the biggest reason. Kamala Harris has a dirty past. Before we even look at that though, we have to take a step back and look at what she's running on. She has came out numerous times to denounce crooked police officers and police brutality on the campaign trail. As we know, racial tensions have been at an all-time high recently, and police brutality is at the forefront of modern political discussion in America. Seeing as she runs on the idea that police officers should be brought to justice for their crimes, it only seems logical that in her time as Attorney General of California, she would have practiced what she preaches today. However, this isn't true. Kamala Harris had numerous complaints of racially motivated policing and police brutality filed against her police force, and as Joe Biden brought up, two of the most segregated school districts in the country were under her watch. Yet Kamala Harris rarely stepped in to take the side of the victims. It's clear to most Democrats and Republicans that the only reason she acts like she cares now is because it's going to help her politically. Side note, when Tulsi Gabbard and Kamala Harris were on the debate stage on July 31st, 2019, some people might know what I'm saying, Tulsi Gabbard tore into her based on the idea that she does not support people who are victims of police brutality and segregation in today's America, and it became the most notable part of either campaign's runtime for the entire election cycle. The next issue I have with Kamala Harris is the reason she was selected. I believe that her race and gender had a big factor in the decision. Now, before anything happens, don't get me wrong. I'm all for a POC woman in office. I wholeheartedly support it. However, gender should never come in the way of policy in a democratic society. My biggest issue with the pick is that in today's culture, the DNC thought it would be a good idea to pick Kamala Harris based more off of her appearance rather than her actual policy. And no office in America should be ran off of identity. This is something that most radical leftists will preach too, because they don't want the white man holding all forms of power. So same thing happens with Kamala Harris. And if Kamala Harris doesn't actually represent the people that she says she does, it doesn't matter what race or gender or ethnicity she isn't meant for office. Also, if you wanted a POC woman as vice president, the DNC should have picked Tulsi Gabbard. She is a far better representative policy-wise, and she used to serve in our military. She's a veteran. They wouldn't do this though, as Tulsi Gabbard ran under the guise of being a Democrat, but in reality she was a centrist that didn't support the DNC as a regime and wasn't fully behind the two-party system. The last issue isn't directly with Kamala, but rather with the DNC as a whole. They were far better candidates to be vice president. Like I said before, Tulsi Gabbard was definitely one of them. Another one was Andrew Yang, who, as many of you know, is my favorite candidate. And despite his policy of universal basic income, Yang was miles ahead of all other candidates on conservative turnover rates. By this, I mean that conservatives who wouldn't vote for Trump would vote for Yang at a very high rate. If Biden wanted to take advantage of the growing divide between conservatives and Trump on the Republican side, he would have picked Yang to pull in those voters. Yang is also a businessman. He grew up under immigrant parents and he is Asian himself. This would break numerous barriers in the way of identity in the big office, but it wouldn't put identity before policy like they did with Kamala Harris. I have a whole host of problems with the RNC, but today I think I'm only going to cover the main one. This was the sheer amount of lies told to the public by those at the RNC who spoke. Just looking at Trump's speech alone, the man lied and made misleading statements over 20 times during his 120-minute speech. That's a falsification to the American public every 6 minutes. And the ones that enraged me the most have to do with job loss and the American Care Act. The problem I have with his representation of job loss is that Trump completely misleads the viewer into thinking our situation is better than it is. For example, Trump said that they recorded a record 9 million new jobs. The part he conveniently left out, in the past 3 months alone, we lost 22 million jobs. To explain it better, let's take Mark Cuban's example on Sean Hannity's show on Fox News.
2.5 million new jobs and a record retail sales in the history of the country. Yes, Donald Trump did that, not Biden, in the basement.
You know what? I explained it to my kids, son. John, it's like I explained it to my kids. When your bank account goes from $10 to $1, and then all of a sudden it goes to $2, you can say you doubled your bank account, but you're still down 80%.
The next thing I want to look at is his stance on affordable and accessible care for the average American. This lie is yet another spit in the face of those affected by the virus and illness all over the country. While Trump says his administration has worked hard to make healthcare affordable during this pandemic, his administration has actively undermined the Affordable Health Care Act, or ACA, or Obamacare, throughout the pandemic. For the people under the ACA's care, as time goes on, things start to seem scarier and scarier, and if the administration wants to mobilize these people to get back to work, which is one of their biggest goals, they should at least make sure that they won't have their lives ruined if they get severely ill and won't be able to pay for the bills. Another part of the 9 million new jobs had to do with necessity throughout the whole course of this pandemic. See, the Trump administration has constantly treated the virus like a short-term issue. They didn't provide rental relief when they said they did, and a quick side note about the fact that they didn't provide rental relief, they said that people who can't pay rent during the 3 months they provided that rental relief would have to actually pay rent for those 3 months at the end of the hiatus. So a lot of people got evicted because of that, but nobody knew about that. As well as this, people had no money, so they couldn't pay their bills. So rather than giving them $600 or $800 a week so they could live properly, Republicans like Mitch McConnell laughed when people even brought up this idea of giving people money to live. The craziest thing to me in all of this is that the political system as a whole used us, the American people, as pawns to push their agenda. Rather than giving us the relief we need, we were faced with a system that denied us necessity so they could get certain agendas passed into law. Are these the quote-unquote people who represent us? Because to me, it seems like they just use us to get in office and turn their back on us when they succeed. Overall, these conventions brought to light many issues I have with both the DNC and RNC. However, come November, voting Democrat will still be better than voting Republican, hence settle for Biden. This is for one main reason. Our country is already unstable with all of the issues we face and the ones that I've laid out in the past 3 episodes. And a crazy divisive president who we can attribute a majority of these problems to is the last person we need in office right now. Thank you for watching and have a good night.